Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 20. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Well, listeners or viewers, if things look and sound a bit different, they are. Steve, where are you coming to us broadcasting live from, I think, the other side of the world still? Tell us, where are you?
Pretty much. I'm in the United Arab Emirates. The particular emirate I'm in at the moment is Abu Dhabi. I'm in my fabulous hotel room. And
Very nice.
But
Very nice.
Earlier in the week, I was over in Dubai speaking at the Meena Retail Congress, which is a couple-day congress or event that is,
Right.
I think, the longest-standing retail-related event in the Middle East. A lot of shopping center people, a lot of retailers there. So it was a great deal of fun and quite interesting.
Well, and you and I were talking off mic about some of the shopping malls and both scale and scope. You know, it's a great. It's so great to.
Yeah.
I'm a bit envious. It's so great to get out and see the world again, kind of back to the before time where you can actually, walk in different places and experience them. I at a top level, any early impressions from now? You've been over to that side of the world before, but any early impressions from what you saw today or this week?
Well, it's really a booming area. Continues to be a ton of construction. UAE has got a very high vaccination rate and has a little app, kind of a vaccine passport. So people are out and about. And as many listeners might know, there are some pretty over-the-top malls here, a few of which I got to visit. One that I saw earlier this week has 1,000 stores in it and 13 anchors. It's the Mall of the Emirates in Dubai.
Wow.
And a lot of global brands, a lot of brands that are really specific to the region. But it's a booming economy. I mean, just apartments, office buildings, tourist attractions being built everywhere. So it's a lot of fun to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure you're still processing. So I'm sure your insights will kind of roll out during season 4 as we kind of talk about different things. Just great context, right? It's just wonderful context to be out and seeing new things. So for this episode, we've got a great episode ahead. We've got Elram Goran, who is the co-founder and CEO of Fabric, which is micro fulfillment robotics. So you and I have just been both so fascinated by both, to some degree, the technology, but also just the strategy behind, fulfillment, competing by having product where it is getting out of the back of the store or the side of the store. So it's a great interview, and it really opens our minds up, I think, to the possibilities. And so anyway, I really enjoyed talking to Elram. It was a good interview.
Yeah, I feel like there's this intersection, which I'm sure we'll keep coming back to in some way, shape, or form, this intersection between the hyper growth of online grocery. That was the category, huge category that went from very low e-commerce penetration pre-pandemic to, I think it's about doubled in the last couple of years. So that's an interesting trend. And then there's this whole idea that we get into about how to improve the profitability of last mile delivery. So, which goes beyond grocery, as we talk about. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic. And I think there'll be a lot of news about that going forward.
Well, and it's a hot topic amongst the retailers I talk to. Many are either considering it, it's on their radar screen, and some are actually in the middle of doing it. So we're not talking about potential or theory here. It's a really burgeoning part of the retail equation. So speaking of burgeoning part of the retail equation, that's a rough transition there for you. Let's talk about news of the week. So have you been keeping your eye on what's happening back on this side of the world? What are your thoughts, and what do you want to lead off with this week?
Well, I have, when the jet lag strikes me, I get on my computer and I just read, go to CNBC or Wall Street Journal or whatever and see what's going on. Well, we are, I think, in the last week of big earnings announcements for the quarter, and there were, once again, quite a lot of them. My takeaway, I kind of put them into two buckets. There were the earnings that came from legacy retailers or retailers that have been around for a while. I guess you could call them analog native or not necessarily direct to consumer. And for the most part, earnings were pretty strong, both sales and earnings. Costco reported, Lululemon reported, Restoration Hardware, and they were all up very strongly on sales. All had margin improvement, very strong
Yeah.
operating performance. RH is the one, and I talk about RH in my book. I guess I don't know. Do you want to do the announcement about our final guest, or shall I do the announcement?
Well, since you mentioned it, why don't I tee you up? Why don't I tee you up to hit the
Yeah,
ball out
I'll
of the park,
set
so to
you
speak?
spike, or you set, I'll spike.
Yes, I'll set you, Spike. Our season 3 finale interview. This gentleman mentioned RH when he thought of great examples of brand and retail. And this gentleman, actually, as a teaser, was a part of your first book launch, and he is the one and only.
Yes. Scott Galloway, the big dog, will be joining us. So we have already recorded
Yeah.
that episode, so we do know what he talks about. And yeah, we talks about RH, and RH is one of those brands that really continues to fight against the narrative. I often talk about them, as I mentioned, I talk about them in my book. I talk about them in my keynotes.
Yeah.
They've invested in these really palatial stores, and their digital capabilities are okay, but they're certainly not a digital first brand by any
No.
stretch of the imagination. And they have continued to gain market share. They've continued to open stores, and blockbuster sales performance and margin performance. The stock has continued to
Yeah.
skyrocket. Um, on the flip side of that are a number of reports from our digitally native direct to consumer brands, and they're all pretty anywhere from bad to disappointing. Rent the Runway reported to their sales were up a lot, and folks know Rent the Runway does what the name sounds like: rent products, fashion products. They've started selling some individual pieces directly, but their sales were up a lot comparing to a really dismal quarter last year. But despite that big sales increase, they actually lost more money.
Yeah.
Chewy's, the pet supply company, had also pretty strong sales growth, about 24%. Looking at my notes, and margin expanded, but they also, I mean, there's some one-time expenses in there, but they're best case kind of breaking even. And I think we talked about Chewy's last quarter. They were sort of in this perfect position where they got this big bump from things moving to online, and all the pandemic puppies seem to be driving a lot of sales. So their stock took a big hit. And then the last one I'll mention is Stitch Fix, which has been public for a while now, and they've had really kind of a roller coaster
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah.
Sales have continued to
Yeah.
increase. They broke even, I think, for a couple of quarters. Now they're losing money again. So I think this is just all part of this narrative of kind of how surprising it is that some of these brands that have gotten a big gift from the pandemic in terms of a lot of the new customer acquisition and a lot of marketing costs going down, still just having a hard time making any money.
Well, and one of our most popular episode guest, Dan MacArthur, talked about Rent the Runway, and he said, "Listen, he's worried because of their his CAC, customer cost of acquisition,
Yeah.
and also because he said, listen, you got to take an accounting write down on some of this merch if it isn't moving. Anyway, look him up. He's always insightful posts, and he just kind of pulls back why they're not making money and what. It's really an interesting concept, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
concept itself works, and you said itself. The concept itself is very, very interesting. It fits a great space, but it's just tough to make the business model actually make money, which
Yeah.
is,
The thing I think to watch out for, and we got into this on our Profitless Prosperity episode, is I personally think for most of these brands that have been around for a while, it seems to me like it could only get tougher going forward. There's all these issues
mm,
of, Apple's cookie policy, acquisition costs are going up. A
yeah,
lot of these companies are now investing in physical retail, which consumes a lot of capital. You don't have sort of the natural gift of traffic to online that you had in the pandemic time. So I think as we
yeah.
see more and more of these companies go public and we see more of their investor reports, we get to really dissect what's under the hood. So we'll see.
All right, well, let's talk about Amazon. There's some news out about Amazon that you were sharing kind of off mic around it's interesting, the multiple parts of their business model. This part looked at their seller fees. What did we learn this week?
Yeah, well, I think we're required by law to talk about Amazon in every episode, so this is our opportunity.
Right.
I'm going to try to keep this brief. If people are interested, they should go check it out. But I thought this was an interesting story for a couple reasons. One, in our recent episode with Chris Bell on Perch, we were talking with him about all the merchants that are selling through the marketplace and all the fees that Amazon charges them, and whether at some point Amazon would basically squeeze those guys to maximize profit. This report talks about how much those fees have gone up. So the report from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which is a great name, says that 34% of all revenue made by third-party sellers will go to Amazon, which is up from 26% in 2017 and 19% in 2014. Now, Amazon, to be fair, has pushed back, saying that report is not accurate. But I think it speaks to two things. One, this potential squeeze on the third-party market, which has become such a huge part of Amazon. But the second piece, which really gets to this narrative about that people still believe that Amazon doesn't make any money in retail. Well, this is the part of the business where they absolutely make a ton of money, because they do charge some pretty hefty fees, and they don't carry any inventory, and there's a lot of really positive financial dynamics in the flywheel. So again, this third-party marketplace activity has obviously become humongous for the whole industry, but a really important driver for Amazon. And there's at least some indications that maybe some of the third-party sellers are starting to get squeezed. So that's the problem of becoming too reliant, perhaps, on Amazon.
Well, and it's a great point, and I know that many retailers here in Canada and the U.S. are opening up their own marketplaces. Major retailers are making announcements to try to do essentially kind of clone the flywheel to some degree and say, listen, we got lots of traffic, let's expand the merchandise along the same model, and maybe that provides some kind of bandwidth, but nobody can compete with Amazon's reach. So we'll see how it all. We'll see how it all shakes out. Well, there's a great roundup, great stories. Let's get to our interview with Elrom, again, from the co-founder and CEO at Fabric. And as a reminder, our next episode is our last episode of the season. We're going to take then a bit of a hiatus until January. We'll, if all things go well, get together, you and I, for a in-person session. At least several at the NRF. I've described our podcast as the pandemic puppy of podcasts, because you and I never actually have been in the same physical place since we started the podcast. So
we have not.
That'll be just a pile of fun. And our season finale is just such a great episode. We've already had the interview, so we know it's a great interview, wide-ranging, spot-on insights from the one and only Scott Galloway, so be sure and tune into that. But for now, let's get to Elrom at Fabric.